All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. I've met a lot of you now the last couple of workshops. My name is Julie Mock. I'm the Regional Sustainability Contractor for Chaffee County. We're hosting these energy code workshops as part of a grant through the Colorado Energy Office. So we'll be having one just about every month through the rest of 2026. We've got a good lineup of both in-person coaches. We may throw some webinars and things in there. But we are going to be recording today and all of the sessions. So if you miss one, you can watch it online. But we love it if you're here in person to be able to ask questions and interact with our presenters and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think everybody's signed up in the back, but just make sure your email is correct on there so we can let you know about future upcoming events. Yeah, and we'll get started. I'm going to kick it over to Bobby and Ann. They are here from Blanca Electric Homes. They did a heat pump install for me down in Canyon City. And told me they were interested in working up in this area and were gracious enough to give us their time today. So I'll kick it over to them. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. All right, you want to go to the agenda slide?
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll do some intros after our agenda, tell you our backstory before we get into it. I will start by saying, we love doing these types of presentations. We've done a lot for homeowner groups, HOAs, churches, a lot of folks, and that's a lot more of like, what is a heat pump? How does it work? The last one we did was for my niece's 4th grade class. So this is a little bit higher level than that. We didn't use the same slides. We added some new stuff. But we'll definitely talk more at just like the higher level and this type of stuff. But please, please, please ask questions. We'll stop with any section for questions, time for questions at the end. But these things go a lot better if you guys ask questions versus us just talking the whole time. And what we'll go through is, first, we got a section of just like our learnings about doing this the past few years. So we'll talk about myth busting, heat pumps in Colorado. We'll talk about what retrofits are right for a heat pump. We'll talk about backup heat, pairing with weatherization. Then, what I think you guys are most excited, and we got most of our time, is real world examples. We took photos and situations from 3 recent heat pumps we did, 3 very different ones, and we want to walk you through what we did, how we got to the final result, and again, hopefully really engaging discussion there. And then we'll wrap up with just rebate stacking. It's a really big thing we do to help make this affordable for homeowners, a summary, and more Q&A. So that's what we got for you. But before we do that, we'll tell you who we are.
All right. So a little bit of background, Blanca Electric Homes, what we do. We are a home electrification contractor outfit. We do residential retrofits. And so that includes heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, induction stoves, solar, EV chargers, any sort of major electric upgrade, and weatherization to pair with that, insulation and air sealing. And we're based out of La Vita, and we sort of started about a year ago in La Vita, and so have just been kind of slowly expanding from La Vita, learning that pretty much the entire southern central Colorado region is pretty underserved when it comes to heat pump installs. So this is where we started, but more locations on the way. Like Julie said, we've actually found a lot more business, Canyon City and Salida, and so we're starting to move into this area. And our story, I'll share mine and then Bobby can share his, but we both have been working in this industry for about 5 years now. So it's not our deep background, but I would say both of our passions now. And we have had a fair amount of experience in that 5 years. My background, I have sort of a broader business background in strategy, ops, project management. I've worked at nonprofits, big business. I worked at Nike and I've been to business school. So kind of have the business chops. But I got into this because I bought a house in Portland, Oregon, where I lived when I worked at Nike, and wanted to do something that was sort of more like climate conscious for the house. And so learned about electrification through that process. Luckily had a mentor from Nike who has a big outfit called Electrify Now that does a lot of educational events. So learned from him about what to and what not to do. And the process really sucked. And so that was my first foray into all right, I'm a relatively educated person who has a good mentor, and yet this was still a really challenging experience. So that sort of set the groundwork for me of what could I do? Could I work for a company where we actually try to make this a little bit easier for people? So fast forward, we moved to Denver, and I ended up working at a startup that does home electrification via software for the last few years. Learned a lot about selling heat pumps and all of that, and we'll share some of that knowledge today. But felt a little bit like they didn't really need our help in Denver and Boulder, where there are 40 contractors that you can call. My family has about a 100-year history in La Vita. My grandfather built a cabin there 100 years ago. My family's from farmers from eastern Kansas. And so my parents actually retired there, and we lived with them for a short period of time when we were moving out here. And we tried to help some friends get a heat pump. And yet again, the experience really sucked. And we could barely find any. When we did find a contractor, they gave us crazy prices and spec'd us terrible equipment. And we didn't, this was a few years ago, we didn't know enough at the time to say, how could we make this better? So, we went and got our experience working in electrification. Bobby will share his story. And then we got smarter and said, hey, we have this experience, but no one's doing this. No one's working in Southern Colorado. Let's launch our own thing. So that's how we started Blanca Electric Homes. And I think we're quickly learning La Vita is not the only area that's underserved. Even Pueblo, we're learning, which I had assumed as a bigger city would be well served. Definitely not the case, and definitely when it comes to like low income and understanding the rebate programs there. So we'll talk more about all of that there, and I'll kick over you for your side.
By the way, I should say, if it's not obvious, we're married. Husband wife company. There's our little
no, that's just a little baby for sure.
Prop baby. Yeah. So my background before this, coming out of college, I worked at the company CarMax for 10 years. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, where they're headquartered. They had the nicest basketball court in the whole city of Richmond. So when I got out of college, I was like, well, that's where I need to work. Spent a few years as a data analyst, got pretty tired of that, and then spent the next 6 years running dealerships, where it was really cool. I got to move around the country, open new dealerships, learn a lot more about like the ops side of the business and all that. Really enjoyed that process. Eventually brought me to Denver and now to Portland, where I met Ann. And then after 10 years at CarMax, was ready for a career change. Great company, but just I didn't have a passion for where people bought their cars. And like Ann, I was like, let me electrify my home in Richmond, Virginia. I'd heard great things about going electric, all the reasons why that we'll get into. Same thing, had such a terrible process. I did so much research in it. I was like, I learned enough. I've got sales experience. Let me see if I can just switch this industry. So that's what eventually led me into home electrification. Like Ann, got a job with Elephant Energy out of the Denver Boulder region. Spent a few years there selling, then led a sales team of 7, which was really cool because I got to do, I think we hit our 1,000th heat pump install in my time there. And I came pretty early. So I was probably around for 800 of these Mitsubishi cold climate heat pumps. A lot of learnings that way. What's great now about being about Blanca is we get to do it all, not just the sales and the design, but we're right there for install. So I feel like it was a really nice crash course into this type of equipment and learning in a big city. Now we get to go apply it in an area that we have even more passion for. So that's what led us here. So yeah, let's jump right into myth busting. We're going to ping pong back and forth on these 4 topics. And again, we'll stop, but please feel free to raise your hand if you got a question. We'll get to a stopping point. We'll get to it. So the myth, heat pumps just don't work in this climate. Obviously, Colorado, we're altitude. When we're in Denver, we're dealing 5,200 feet. In La Vita, we're over 7,000 feet. We've done some up to 8,600. So we're dealing with altitude, and we'll talk about having to derate the equipment for it's just not going to have as much power as it does at sea level. So we've got high altitude, we got freezing temperatures, and these standard heat pumps, which we've seen in La Vita, really start to struggle below 40 degrees. So really, they just got a bad rap in cold weather climates like us in Colorado. And until recently, this was true. However, as we like to say, check the specs. So cold climate heat pumps have really gotten a lot better, and they get the job done. So this 3-ton Mitsubishi heat pump we highlighted for you down there at 5 Fahrenheit is cranking out 42,000 BTUs per hour. And that's a 3-ton. So even down at 5 Fahrenheit, it's maintaining its max output, even below that rated 3-ton of 3,600. So we've got max output down to 5 Fahrenheit. It works all the way down to negative 23 Fahrenheit. Now, I know most places in Colorado don't actually get that cold. With our heat pump, our Mitsubishi in our house, we experienced a negative 15 degree overnight, woke up, still 70 in the house. So these things can get all the way down negative 23. They've got options for ducted, ductless, mixed configurations, which makes it a great use case for 90+% of homes. Yeah, talk about that. The result for the homeowner is it can be freezing outside. We're still going to maintain 70 degrees. And other manufacturers are catching up. Daikin, Bosch, Carrier, Midea, Mr. Cool. We have only been working with Mitsubishi because it was one of the first on the scene. It's what we're most experienced with, but we're excited to continue to look at these other manufacturers whose spec sheets now look like this and just continue to bring more kind of diversity and different price points to homeowners too. But you heard from our backgrounds, we're numbers people. So we really put a lot of faith in these spec sheets, and with our experience have gotten to live out that these things really can perform at altitude at these really cold climates. And then there's really clear benefits to a heat pump. Hopefully, this group is already really bought into heat pumps, but if there's skepticism, we're happy to talk about it here after the presentation. But the things that we really like to highlight for our customers, first and foremost above anything, improve comfort. One of our mentors says, comfort is for closers. There's a lot of reasons why someone might come and talk to you about a heat pump, but at the end of the day, the improved comfort is what gets someone really excited about a heat pump. For one thing, cooling comes for free. Like almost no one has cooling down in La Vida until they get this heat pump. And it's getting hotter. So there's excitement with that. But I think that the real thing is better airflow. These single stage, 2-stage furnaces that are all on or all off create these hot and cold spots. We can dive into the physics, but heat pumps move more air. So you're mixing air throughout the home. They're inverter driven. They run at whatever power they need to. So the thing that people physically feel is like, wow, it's more comfortable in my house and it's quieter with this heat pump. So improved comfort is one of the biggest benefits I don't think a lot of people think about. They're certainly more efficient, 3 to 4 times more efficient than furnace, boiler, electric resistance. It's got that COP, which we can dive into numbers, but ultimately when you average it out for a whole winter, usually 3 to 4 times more efficient with your energy. We're definitely excited to talk about rebate stacking, but it can really bring the cost, the upfront cost of a heat pump down from, if you're looking at a furnace AC combination, and no air pollution. That's greenhouse gas emissions. That's also just burning gas in a home is gone. You talk about gas in the home and asthma. So these are our 4 really big talking points that we want to make sure every homeowner knows. These are the benefits. This is why you want to consider switching to a heat pump.
And this is a heat pump job we just completed in Canyon City. You'll see a lot of Laura. You'll see a lot of her in our presentation. But kind of based off of those benefits, we talk to the customer based off of what benefit will resonate the most with them, right? That's sort of like sales 101. What is the problem that someone has, and make sure that what you have actually solves that. And what we've seen is that customers are kind of there might be more, but these are sort of the main like archetypes, characteristics that we've been seeing of different customers. First, like Bobby said, comfort issues. A lot in La Vida, people don't have air conditioning. They want cooling for the first time, or they're tired of their window unit. It's so loud and inefficient. There may be like, if people are doing remodels, additions that just don't have heating or cooling at all, and they finally feel like, hey, I'm tired of the space heater. My bills are really high. We want this room to be more comfortable. Someone has an old failing system, of course, right? If they have a furnace that's 20 or 30 years old, we typically don't do emergency replacements, and that's only because we're small, and in an emergency, someone needs heat immediately. And so we can't today deliver a 1 or 2 day turnaround. We'd love to be able to do that in the future, but we have to be able to be a little bit bigger in order to do that. But so a lot of folks are coming to us before the system fails. Utility bill concerns, like Bobby said, if this equipment is 3 to 4 times more efficient. One of the reasons we started in La Vida, other than the fact that kind of have some connections and family history there, is everyone's on propane. And so the cost difference from being on propane to going to electric saves people somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 a year. So if you're able to get rebates stacked on top of that to make the upfront cost lower, you're saving someone like tens of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of their equipment. And so that's been a way in for us with a lot of people, is like, hey, are you spending an arm and a leg on propane? Or if you have electric resistance, are you spending an arm and a leg on that? We can cut those costs in half or more. So, and then we see another group of people who are climate conscious, right? Obviously, these are more efficient. They run off electricity and not gas. Some folks already have solar, and so they're looking to make their solar go further. Some folks just want to be off. We sort of see this tied with reducing gas. People want to be off gas or propane entirely for health reasons, asthma in the house. They just, for climate reasons. And also safety issues. There's been some big wildfires in the regions that we're in recently, and there's a lot more people concerned about having propane tanks and gas on their property. So that we sort of see a variety of issues, but for all of these, like a heat pump is a solution, and we try to figure out what someone really wants.
Pause it. Any questions? I know we're kind of going over this fast. We can get to the examples, but
So you say 3 to 4 times more efficient from propane to electric. So that would be telling me that my 3,600 square foot house that runs off of in-floor heat, propane, I have a $400 a month bill for 3 months out of the year. That's it. So you're telling me that that's going to go down to an average of 100?
so we're talking COP, coefficient of performance. If it's electric to electric, it's easy, right? It's like it cuts it by a fourth. But now you've got to factor in the cost. So going from propane to electric, the math we do for folks in La Vida, we see similar magnitude, like 2, 3, 4 times more. One of the examples I'll share was a customer who is on, she's on Excel Gas and Black Hills Energy. Excel has some of the cheapest gas. Black Hills has pretty expensive electricity. She had almost no savings, even though she's using less energy. That's where because you're switching fuel, you've got to take into account the relative cost.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to explain it to a customer that they're going to save on the utility bill. I have a hard time pushing it because I see electric as being still extremely expensive in Northern County.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've built our own calculator. There's something the RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, has a calculator. I think it's tough to use, but one exists. Like there's ways to try to figure out that is. Like for example, Elephant, when I was there, opened a Massachusetts branch. That's where our founders were from. Electricity is so expensive out there. Like we had to have people sign something saying like, your costs will go up. Sure. Unbelievable rebates. They're getting these things for next to nothing, but your costs. So knowing your region, knowing the cost of electricity, gas, propane, whatever folks are switching from, very, very important to set expectations.
And I mean, here is there natural gas in town, right? And then propane. So I mean, even like in town versus here would have a different. It's called spark spread, if you want to sound cool, which is like the cost difference between the gas and electric. And like the bigger the spark spread is, aka like the more expensive gas is relative to electricity, the more you save by going to a heat pump. But sometimes that spread isn't that big. So that's where we try to bring in rebates as well, or lean on these other things. Is like, well, like Laura actually is a good example. She's on Atmos Gas and Black Hills Electric, and she's not going to save a lot, but she had an addition that didn't have any heating, cooling, and she's low income, and so we were able to actually put her through a program where this was free. So we found a way to make this work for her, but she was like, I probably couldn't have afforded this and without the savings if it hadn't been free. No. So it's unfortunate because there's not an easy answer of like, well, you're in this zip code, so what's the overlap of the utilities and how much are they paying? We ask for everyone's bills and we run the math through our calculator, and we are very careful to say we don't say you'll save this much. We said if you had a heat pump last year and you use the exact same amount of heat, which everyone knows as soon as you upgrade your system, you use your system very differently. And so, but we say, if you would use this last year, you would have saved this much.
Exactly.
If you're switching systems, then it's.
Well, we would keep the in-floor heat. We're actually doing a house right now they wanted to be all electric.
Yeah.
It is a heat pump system.
Yeah.
For an in-floor heat system.
Yeah.
And that's our first thing we're doing. So we're kind of, is this going to work?
Yeah.
It'll certainly work. And I mean, that's where we're going to talk manual J, manual S for heat loads and picking equipment, knowing what you're solving for. Like a few of our examples, they have other heating systems. Like, okay, great. We're getting some BTUs there. So we don't need to have the biggest heat pump to cover you all the way down to 0 Fahrenheit with just the heat pump. Right. So it's like, honestly, I think it's the fun part of the job. It's like every house is a puzzle. Obviously, we're in the retrofit game. If it's a new house, you get to design it however you want. But every house, we're solving that puzzle. The last thing I always like to point out is like how COP works with heat pumps. We're all used to 80% efficient to 96% efficient furnaces. Like with electric baseboard, both those things are creating heat. So it can't be above 1. A perfectly efficient electric baseboard would have a COP of 1. Heat pumps aren't creating heat. They're moving it from one place to another. That's how, even at 5 Fahrenheit, that spec sheet, it had a 2.0 COP. When it's, running in, it's 50 degrees outside, you got, it's just humming along. That's where it's like 4 to 5 COP. So That's how we say 3 to 4 times more efficient. It's moving heat, it's not creating heat. And that's how it can be so much more efficient than something that generates heat. Yeah. Good question.
Cool.
Any other
Yeah.
questions? We love
Keep them
questions.
coming.
Yes.
Oh,
In a couple slides back, you mentioned a hybrid system where it was a mini split, and it was like inductive / hybrid or something like that.
Mhm.
I'm curious about that because I'm having problems. I've kind of gotten away from installing mini splits because in a really tight home, without some kind of research or URD or something like that, we're having humidity issues.
That makes sense.
And so I'm curious about a hybrid inductive mini split system that can
Yeah.
introduce fresh air.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever done one of those or anything about them?
We certainly done a ton of the split systems because we're dealing only retrofit and a lot of low income. We don't have any houses that are so tight that we need to worry about that. It's the opposite. But one of our 3 examples we're going to go through is someone who had an air handler for forced air plus 2 mini splits. So we can definitely talk about that and talk more about like what that looks like, equipment and install wise. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious when you see it that you're like, oh, that's it, or it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but we can dive into that.
cool. Oh, wonder what
Oh,
happened.
you
to
put
the-
animations on this one?
No, I wonder what happened to the pictures.
Might be hiding behind.
Huh.
Well, we had nice photos.
I know. What happened to them?
That's what it's showing there, but not on.
Let me see if I can just refresh it. Sorry, guys. Oh, okay. Well, that one, I'm not sure why that one isn't showing up, but I'll verbally describe it.
Imagine a furnace.
It looked exactly like this, except this is a 21-inch wide air handler, and this was a 14-inch wide furnace that didn't have a box that it was sitting on. But the kind of point here is, so this is Laura's house again. We installed a split system for her, so relevant for your question. But often the puzzle is figuring out, someone has an existing system, so then what heat pump solution works. I will say, you talked about in-floor heating. We are only doing air source heat pumps right now. I've not had that much experience with in-floor. I know I think it was you who said you installed an Arctic for yourself. I've heard mixed reviews of in-floor systems, to be honest, with heat pumps, of just like the specs are nowhere close to the air source heat pumps. And so we also, for retrofits, almost no one has in-floor heating, right? This is typically a newer build or newer construction. We're working with homes like pre-1950s. So we're seeing it less. I feel like there's a hardware issue and there needs to be more development there, but I'm curious. I have not experienced as much. So a lot of what we're talking about is, someone has a furnace, someone has a boiler, what are the solutions? So in this case, she had a furnace that was right here. And like I mentioned, she had an addition that didn't have heating. So we decided to do a split system where we did an air handler unit to replace the central air. And then I'll show on the next slide the mini split that we added. But to make sure that this solution works, you can't just say, oh, someone has a furnace, great, we'll do an air handler. No, the biggest problem with that is that a lot of the time older furnaces have old ductwork that cannot support the airflow from a heat pump. Like Bobby said, the reason heat pumps are more comfortable, one of the many, is that it blows more air at a lower temperature than a furnace. So you're not getting those hot blasts that go on and off, but it means more air is circulating through the system. So if your ductwork isn't sufficiently sized, then the rooms that are furthest away from the unit will not get as much heating or cooling. So we do measurements of the ductwork and kind of we use a little ductilator to measure the static friction and make sure that it's sized correctly. In her case, she did have decently sized ductwork. So sized ductwork really matters. Having enough space for the air handler. You can't see in this photo, but her furnace was 14 inches wide. This is 21 inches wide. As you can see, it was a very tight squeeze to get it in there. But another thing too, this was a side return. And the Mitsubishi units we work with, the return comes in through the bottom. And so we had to have a box that it sits on, which raises the height of it by a couple feet. So just all these little things you have to make sure work. And then another one that is true for all of the heat pumps is there needs to be sufficient electrical capacity. The units we're typically installing for whole homes 3 to 4 tons, somewhere in there. And that's usually a 40 to 50 amp breaker. So if someone has an 100 amp panel, usually is not sufficient. It usually needs to be upgraded. We can play games sometimes there. But luckily, like almost every utility or rebate program offers some sort of discount for a panel upgrade. But that almost always there has to be space or there has to be an upgrade. And then here was the addition that she had. She was using a space heater before, and so we installed a mini split for her on the wall. And the kind of, what you need in that case is you need the space for a wall head, or there's also floor mounts. There also needs to be a connection back to the condenser. So line set needs to be run. We try to do that through attics or crawl spaces wherever possible, since it is, I think, like 5 pictures ago. It's pretty significant. It's like 8 inches of thick plastic. You can paint over it any color, but I mean, it's visible, and some homeowners
And expensive.
Yep. So, but there has to be a connection at some way, and that's part of the puzzle. Do you run it on the exterior? If so, talk with the homeowner through the roof lines, down below. Do they want to paint it? And then through attics, crawl space, wherever possible. We always try to place them on exterior walls because these units generate condensate, and so you have to have a little bit of drainage that goes out, and we need the electrical capacity for it. And then here's an example. One thing that we really try to do differently: heat pumps look different. Like most people might have heard of it, but they don't understand what it looks like. And especially a whole home unit. I mean, you saw Laura, she's shorter than me, but these units are Bobby's height because we put them on a snow stand and a concrete pad to elevate them off the ground and prevent icing. And they're big. They take up a lot of space, and people they think of an air conditioner unit, right? They think of a barrel air conditioner and not a double fan. So we try to do these mock-ups to say, hey, this is what it will look like. And then that line set I told you about, this is what it's going to look like. And same, these are pretty crude clip arts, I will admit, but like just to try to give them a sense of that's how much space it's going to take up on your wall. We ended up putting the branch box outside for her, but if we had mounted it in her unfinished basement, it would have looked like that. So we always try to call out, like, what does the outdoor unit look like? Line set, show them that, and just make sure they're okay with that. I've had some really aesthetically oriented customers, especially in like cabins, log cabins. And a lot of those cabins don't have attics and don't have crawl spaces. And so you're running line set on the exterior, and you have to be really careful with them and say, hey, this is exactly where it will go. Is this, like, if it's a deal breaker for it to go in the front of the house, then that will increase the price because we're going to have to run line set now through be creative. So it matters what the customer wants, and we try to be upfront as much as possible. It helps us later so that even Laura was like, this thing's big. I know you told me that, but it's really big. So.
Questions?
A quick question, maybe you're going to cover it down the road, but I've had clients ask, or designers ask, about putting floor mount units in versus wall mount, just the aesthetics. Is there a big difference in comfort or performance with either of those?
Yeah, we've got one of our examples. We'll have one. Oh, yes. So the question was, some homeowners have asked for a floor mount mini split versus the wall mount for aesthetic reasons. So I'll say, yes, we put them in. We've had a lot of homeowners super happy with it. Sometimes it's actually what we need to do. If you've got, like the one example we'll show, it was an attic that was turned into a second floor. So it was all pitched wall, and there's nowhere to put a wall unit. Or if someone has glass everywhere, then you need to do the wall mount. The benefit to putting it up here is just airflow. You can really send it and get better circulation. But that being said, they've got floor units. You properly size it. It can heat and condition the space. It's just more blowing on you than up above. But yeah, I got plenty of homeowners who want that. I have no problem switching them to it as long as they know how it's going to perform.
Mm-hmm. Ceiling cassettes are another option, which look a lot like that vent right up there. But those are only possible if there's an attic right above. And both of those floor mounts and ceiling cassettes are more expensive. So more premium offerings. Most of the folks we're working with, especially on the rebate side, we're trying to lower cost at every opportunity. Yeah. So,
good. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, let's talk backup heat. So sorry, a lot of text on this one, but it's a common conversation we have over my homeowners, and figure this group will be interested in. So we designed for 99%. That's based on NEEP and ASHRAE recommendations, but basically of the heating season, what is the temperature that is like the 99th percentile, how coldest it gets, designed for that. just because it got down to negative 25 once doesn't mean I want to size a heat pump for negative 25 degrees. So that's a conversation we have with homeowners. We want to design something that's going to get 99% of your heating done, because we'll get to at the bottom, but oversizing is a problem too. So we design for 99. In this region, it's usually somewhere between 0 and 10 Fahrenheit that we want to make sure between our heat load calculations and our equipment pick sizing that we've got our homeowner covered for whatever is recommended in their region. 0 to 10 usually being met. And there's a lot of different, we recommend backup heat if we can't meet that. Sorry, that might have been obvious, but like one of the examples we'll get to with the heat pump, we couldn't quite get there, but we had a nice, elegant backup heat design for them. And we're doing that with our JNS. But there are a lot of different backup heat options. I know most folks are familiar with if you've got a forced air system, you've got dual fuel, you've got a furnace. With these systems, if a homeowner is like, hey, I want to be all electric, or just their house is already all electric, we've got electric resistance heat kit. And us, Blanca, we take a lot of pride, and we are Blanca electric homes. So that's where we're going to start in saying, let's talk about electric heat kit. The reason we don't put one in every single home is it adds a few $1,000s for both the part and the labor itself. Also, they're more expensive to run. That is creating heat. So at most, its COP is, it's going to be less than 1. And it's another point of failure in a system. We usually try to set a lockout temp on these backup heat that says, hey, only cut on when you register it's 15, 10, 5 degrees outside. A lot of examples of they kick on too early and then a homeowner has a higher utility bill. So when we're doing our design, if we can get the heat pump itself to get down to 99%, we're talking to homeowners and saying, hey, we recommend, if it were my house, I would not put in one of these electric heat kits. Let's have other conversations about your insurance plan for that 1%. But obviously, these two are only for forced air systems. And we talked about we want to design for all. Our region down in Levita does electric thermal storage. I don't know how common it is out here in Salida, but that's a box, and we'll show a photo of it, that heats up bricks overnight when the grid is at its cheapest, stores that heat really efficiently, and then disperses it throughout a home with a fan. So that's a very popular region. In San Isabel is the electric in Levita. And then there are other options too. If homes have fireplaces, they already have, like we run into a lot of baseboard electric heat. That's great. Keep it for that 1%. There's a lot of different options, and every home is a puzzle to solve. So we really think about what are all the different things we can pair with our heat pump to make sure you're covered. But when it comes to the heat pump, we design for 99%. And just to be honest, like I think that can be scary for a lot of contractors. In our business, callbacks are bad. You don't want to have that call on Christmas Eve of, hey, it's really cold out and my house is cold. So that being said, we really lean into the math at Blanca. We trust the math. We know oversizing is bad. If I give someone a 4-ton when they only need a 3-ton, they're going to spend more on electricity. And it's actually can short cycle in those not too cold. So we really want to lean into these spec sheets, to our manual J's, pick the right equipment, and design for 99. And then the last thing we do is what we can control is we're great communicators to our customers. Ann already said, most folks aren't used to a heat pump. They're used to that blast of a furnace. So we make sure they know this is how they run. They have an inverter. It's going to run almost 24 hours, but using barely any electricity to do so. We'll let that fan circulate air. It's not going to be as hot, but that's a good thing. It's going to get to all parts of the home. And then also, hey, we designed this thing down to 0. If it's going to get to negative 10 overnight, your house might drop a few degrees overnight, have a space heater for the bedroom. But once the sun comes back up, you're going to get back up to temperature. So communication is really key. And what we found is talking to most homeowners, they're like, oh, when it's really cold, my furnace doesn't keep up anyway. Or, hey, when it's cold, I want to keep the temperature down to save energy. So yeah, again, I've been part of hundreds of these, and the callbacks we have are, if we've done our math right, it's never about the sizing or the design. It's always, hey, this thing's not working the way it's supposed to. And that's why we come back. So the reason we really hit this, it's not to talk about a scary subject, but this is what I've seen a lot of contractors nervous about. I want to be 100% covered. I never want to hear from a customer again. If you do your math right, designing for 99, it's what's going to be best for the homeowner. And that's not what we've gotten callbacks on in the future. Thoughts or questions before going to the next subject? All right.
Cool. Another kind of topic that we love to both educate homeowners about and just sort of make sure people really understand is about how important weatherization is to do with a heat pump. So weatherization includes all insulation, air sealing, and the ABCs sort of rank what the most important insulation is, which attic, basement, or crawl space. And then walls could be good spots, but we're always looking at attics and crawl space. And reasons to do it. I mean, one, like the air weatherization is your best resilience defense. If the power goes out or if it's a cold day, if your house is better insulated, it won't get cold as fast. So second, it will save you energy. I mean, just right away, like most of the time we'll kind of walk through this example, but we're seeing between like, it depends on the sizing, but somewhere between 10 and 40% heat energy savings just by insulating. And if you do have heat savings, then you don't need as big a heat pump, and that really saves people, $5,000 to $10,000, depending on how much we're able to size the heat pump down. So, an example of this is sort of loose from a home that we did look at. Like, if there's a really leaky home that would need 36K of BTU, we could spec a 4-ton heat pump with a heat kit, or a 3-ton with a heat cut, or we could weatherize and get the attic and get a 20% reduction, and then we can size down the heat pump. So then the homeowner has lower utility bills, more even temperatures across the home, because there are comfort improvements, of course, especially with attics and heat. So we, at every chance possible, look for weatherization. It's not always possible. I don't know what the crawl spaces look like in Salida, but I've seen some in Levita that I have tried crawling through, and I immediately got out of there because they're 2 feet tall and there's rat poop and there were scorpions in the most recent crawl space that I was going into. And I was like, I'm out. But it's not always possible. Some homes don't have attics, and so you can't insulate the attic. And only other solutions are like re-siding the entire house, which most homeowners are not going to do because they don't have the budget to do so. But whenever there is the opportunity, we try to take it to weatherize. And I think most utility programs at this point have pretty good rebate programs. And I think for new builds, which I don't know how many of you do, a lot of times there's just code now that says you have to get it to, in Denver, it's R60 for the attic, and then crawl space is usually like R19, I think. So.
All right.
Any questions about weatherization? And then we'll get to the fun real world examples.
And just like how we interact is, I mean, we're kind of heat pump people first. We never pretend to be the ultimate experts on this. We went out, we learned enough to be in a home and say, hey, I was in your attic. You could really use some insulation. And then we've got partners we work with to refer and bring in. So, just our job is really understand this whole ecosystem and be able to say, I'm an expert on heat pump, but I'm not just going to show up and sell you heat pump. That's it. I want to think about the home holistically, even if we're not people who are going to price and install the weatherization. We know enough. We know the rebates to tell people this is a great bang for your buck. You should absolutely do this. All right. Oh, yeah, you're up first with the real world examples.
Real world examples. We have 3 examples that are all pretty different that we thought we'd walk through. I'll talk about the old furnace, no AC, but we have that's in Trinidad. We have a cabin that's in just outside of Levita, about 8,600 feet. And then we have one in town in Levita, and all different systems. So I'll start with kind of the old furnace, and we tried to have this be very picture heavy. So this building is actually an old church. And the woman who bought it was very clear early on that she's incredibly capable, very DIY, had already done a whole bunch of renovation to the space. So I kind of approached her a little bit differently than I would others. But so we walked through the house, and she has, and the pictures are not great, but she had an electric furnace, which is very rare. It was using 80 amps, if you can believe it. It's like basically her whole panel. But when it worked, she said it worked great. She had good airflow. The whole space was very open because it was a church. So there was an open space in a kitchen. So the airflow, first thing I asked her is, how is airflow? When the furnace is on, she said, it's good. Every room is getting heated evenly. That was my first clue that, okay, her ductwork could probably be well sized. I did our measurements of the supply and return and said, yes, okay, this could handle a heat pump. So there was so kind of the first path that we usually take, knowing someone has a furnace, is can we reuse their furnace, or do we need to go the route of mini splits and ductless? So I asked her about airflow. I took the measurements of the ductwork. Great. Let's talk about reusing your furnace. Now the next thing I'm doing is our manual J, which we'll do a demo of the software that we use so you can see how we actually do it. But I had my iPad and was kind of doing my manual J to get a sense of what the heating needs are of the entire building so that then I could size the heat pump accurately. And what I found, kind of here's some screenshots of our manual J and our manual S. She had a huge heat load. It wasn't a big space. It was a little over 1,000 square feet, but there's no insulation anywhere. And the windows are beautiful, old, original stained glass, single pane. So her original heating load was 52,000 BTUs, which if many of you will probably know is above the capacity of a unit, especially a residential size unit, I should say, especially one that needs to be derated for 5,600 feet. So then we talked about, okay, what are your weatherization options? I gave her a ballpark for cost, and she said, that's something I can't afford. I said, okay, then you're going to be doing your weatherization work. Here's what you can do. You can put storm windows on the outside of your glass, since you're not going to replace the windows. She had an attic over the whole space that had like 6 feet of headroom. Great. You can insulate this attic yourself with blown in. And then crawl space, I said, you can put bats on the rim joists. And so I, did my math and said, okay, if you do that, that will reduce your heating need by about a ton. And that now we're in the ballpark of what our Mitsubishi systems can handle. So I spec'd for her a version with a heat kit and then a version without the heat kit. And as you can see, her heat load was a little over 41,000 BTUs. And then without a heat kit, we're talking 36,000. So it was about 5K short. And so that's why I spec'd this backup heat kit, which, as you can tell, is kind of overkill. We don't really need that much heating, but that's the option that's available with that air handler. She literally said, I'm going broke and I'm freezing. And so I knew that we were balancing, like trying to get her warm, but also balancing a budget. So kind of gave her those two options, showed her what the price difference was. And ultimately what she decided is she said, you know what, let me do the weatherization work. Let me see how it works for a winter. I'm going to use space heaters. And if it doesn't work, let's revisit an ETS or another backup heat. She's like, I don't want to pay an extra couple $1,000s for something that I don't know if I'm going to really use. I was like, that's fine. Know that it will be cold until you do until you finish your weatherization work. And that first winter, let's see how it goes. So we put in this 3.5 ton cold climate heat pump, corresponding air handler. She is taking on the work of doing DIY weatherization, and we decided not to do any backup heat, but had that really clear conversation with her. And we were actually able to run her through a rebate program, which Bobby will talk more about some of them, but we're happy to share. Unfortunately, it's a patchwork of rebate programs, some statewide, some utility, some countywide, and it is a pain to figure it all out. And we're still learning kind of the nuances of different areas. But she's in Trinidad, and she was able to take advantage of a state rebate program that got her $9,500 off the cost of the heat pump. So it cut the cost basically in half for her and made it affordable. So happy customer in Trinidad.
Yeah. What questions, or where do you want to dive in on that example?
The backup heat you're referring to, that's the coil that I hear referred to?
Heat kit, yeah. It's just it's like a tiny little electric resistance unit. Looks the same as like a baseboard heating, basically. He actually, his example,
the next one we did an ETS.
They decided to do an ETS, which
it's
I don't think Sangre de Cristo offers the same rebate that San Isabel does, but they're part of Tri-State, so
yeah, they're pretty affordable.
I don't know if it's a cool unit, and it really makes sense if there's a time of use rate, which I think Sangre de Cristo does have, right? Yeah, because it's the same Tri-State. Because you're essentially, they don't. Okay, San Isabel has a time of use ETS rate where it's cheaper at night to use electricity. And so it makes more sense. You're running the ETS at night, storing that energy up in the bricks when it's cheapest, and then releasing it. So we've found, honestly, most folks have some sort of backup heat solution already, because a lot of homes are older, so a lot have wood burning stoves or fireplaces, but ETS is a nice solution when you don't. I feel like I used to be very pro heat kits, and now I'm pretty anti heat kits, and mostly because like Bobby said, they have a lot of points of failure. We've seen a lot of issues with them of just they're not quite installed right. The lockout temp isn't correct. Like one of our good friends called us and says, my utility bill is crazy. And I said, what's the lockout temp of your heat kit? Oh, it's set to 32. Your heat pump's not even working then when it's cold out. So it just introduces another problem. You can do it. It just is, you got to work with someone who really knows what they're doing. So let's turn it over to you.
All right, let's talk upgrade my cabin. So this is one, it was kind of up on Mount Mestis just outside La Vita as you head out towards the sand dunes from 25. It was a 3-season cabin. They love this cabin. They spent a lot of time there, but they're getting older and they want to spend even more time. So like, hey, can we make this a 4-season cabin? So there's currently no HVAC system at all. So of course, immediately we're thinking mini splits versus a ducted system here. Log cabin, lots of windows. I mean, gorgeous view down in that bottom right, but that's definitely going to impact our heat load. They only had 100 amp service and they already had electric range, electric water heater. There's no gas to the house at all. So definitely need to upgrade that. 8,600 feet of elevation. And by the way, we kind of went over that quick. Does everyone know D rates and what we're talking about when we say D rating a heat pump? Cool. Fun
It's okay if you don't. We didn't until we moved here.
Of course.
Yeah.
So heat pumps work by moving heat, obviously by pulling air. As you get higher elevation, the air is thinner. So with the same amount of effort, it cannot extract as much heat from air molecules that are further apart. So when we say D-rate, a heat pump that can do its job at sea level, when you move it up to, say, 5,200 feet, you're losing about 20% the output of that rating. So looking at a spec sheet, if it says I can do 42,000 BTUs per hour at a temperature, at 8,600, I had to derate it, I think it's on the next slide, about 28%. So that 42, multiply it by 0.72. If you can do that math in your head, good for you. But we're getting less output at temperature. That's fine. This equipment is designed to do it. We just have to know that so we don't make a mistake and tell someone you're going to get this performance out of your equipment, but it's actually less. So that's what we mean when we say D-rate.
Yeah, even more of a plug for weatherization, because the higher you get, the worse the D rate. And if you can weatherize, then you can reduce the heat load overall. And then, like, again, with Eliza's home in Trinidad, we couldn't even give her a heat pump. We would have had to do 2 units, and that was just a no-go. Wouldn't have been affordable for her at all. So without weatherization, that job wouldn't have been possible.
Yep. So anyway, we've got lots of fun deration to that elevation, and I've got 3 heating zones. I try to get pictures, but you've got a nice open area here. You can start to see the beginning of the loft. We've got a nice lofted bedroom where the kiddos sleep, and then there's a back bedroom. But this gorgeous area with windows overlooking the area where we're losing a lot of heat. So that's a situation we come into. So similar to what Ann was showing, first we do our manual J. And because we're talking about a zone system, I need to know the heat load of every single room to match the properly sized mini split along with the total outdoor condenser. So I've got, and this we actually took all the way down to -5 Fahrenheit in that region. 30,000 BTUs per hour in my large living area, 4,500 BTUs in the smaller bedroom, and I need 11,000 up in that loft area. This right here is going to be my biggest concern. There's not even a 2-ton mini split, which is the largest I can put, isn't going to serve this area. So I'm already looking at, I need 2 mini splits at least to serve just this one living room area. It had a pitched attic, so there's no insulation I can do above, but we did have a completely bare crawl space and a good sized crawl space. So then I redid my manual J saying, all right, what if we insulate, seal, do everything in the crawl space, can get these numbers down a bit. Now I get to go play with Mitsubishi's equipment selection, Manual S software, based on these 2 inputs. Here's what I can get from my heat pump. A 3-ton system. I can use a 2-ton mini split for that living area, and that number in red, I know there's a lot in there, but I can get 15,000 BTUs per hour at my -5 design of that. I can get 4,100 for the bedroom. I can get 10,200 for the loft. So I'm now a lot closer to these numbers. However, I'm still not there. That living room is a big gap. So enter our backup heat. And in this case, we use an ETS. So if you go to the next slide, And I'm happy to go back to these with questions afterwards. I've got my 3-ton unit, 3 mini splits. We weatherized. I did have to do a panel upgrade, but again, rebate program can pick that up in our area. And then this is the electric thermal storage unit right there. The fan is down below. It's got the bricks. The beautiful thing there is its max output is a little over 12,000 BTUs per hour. We had 15 from the mini split. We've got 12 from there. Now I'm up over 28,000 BTUs per hour, and I needed 26. So now I've hit that temperature. However, it's not always -5 down there. That's just what I designed for, but majority of the time it's not. Majority of the time, that mini split can do the job just on its own. So what we tell our homeowners is do the droop method. Whatever you're setting that mini split in that room, set your backup heat like an ETS 3 degrees cooler. So when that device registers that we're 3 degrees colder than what the mini split wants, that's when it'll kick in, because my mini split is going to be more efficient with energy than that backup source. So that's how we can get creative, insert a backup heating device, but only have it kick on when it's needed in the space. So you can see some photos of what we did in the crawl space. There's our outdoor unit, and then 2 of the 3 mini split heads. I didn't have space for all 3, but you know what they look like at this point. But yeah, was able to get them taken care of down to -5, and they said they've been using it all winter and been really happy with it. So thoughts, questions, anything you want to dive into on designing this mini split system?
You're doing mini splits, do you have to have one in every room, or how do you approach that?
It's a good question. We work with the homeowner, right? Because, I mean, here's another example on this one. I could have done a 4th one, but with every mini split, we're adding cost. You're adding equipment, you're adding usually half a day to install. So we want what's going to help every space be comfortable without having an astronomical cost. The other thing is, again, oversizing is a problem too. If I put the smallest mini split head in a bathroom, it is going to overheat that space and it's going to be inefficient. It's not going to be comfortable. So we're being very strategic about airflow. Like these aren't doors, but if we've got an opening that's wide enough and I can put a mini split, say on a back wall like that, and this room, and let's say there's another room on the other side and there's a nice opening, I would try to get 1 mini split to heat the area and just use a bigger mini split. So again, it's solving the puzzle. I don't necessarily want to or need to put one in every room. It's more a matter of what's going to get the best comfort within the budget of the homeowner. And I guess the other thing I'll say is we serve the homeowner. They're the ones who say yes or no and pay the bills and all that. We also serve the home. Oftentimes I'm in the home and I'm saying, hey, this is what I think is great for your home. If I own this home, this is what I do. The next homeowner might want this. At the end of the day, the homeowner is going to make the decision for retrofits like us. But I want to design something that every single room is going to be treated. Does that answer the question? Is there anything? Okay.
I mean, generally, as a rule of thumb, we are putting one in every bedroom too. Like any room space that has a door that is often closed, we'll have one. But we have gotten creative with some homes where if the doors are open a lot, you can do like a ceiling cassette and then passive venting between rooms, especially if they're not bedrooms. If it's like an office that may be closed to like a hallway, you can do something like that. But generally for the homeowner, and we always say, like, think about, a lot of folks we work with are older or retired, and we're like, think about selling this house. Think about this house going to your kids. You may not use that guest room, but they might. And so don't not put a mini split in this room and have one room without heat, because you don't know no one's going to want to buy a house that has a room without heat. They're going to have to figure something out, and they might even get you to give them a discount for the house for that. So we do say, like, play this forward a little bit and think about how this house will be used in the future to make that decision.
The other fun, again, like this truly is solving a puzzle, is let's say for whatever reason I wanted to put a mini split right here in this room. This is not an exterior wall, and these things have condensation and need to drain. So I could open up the wall to run the condensation to get out, or I could pump it up into the ceiling. But typically you want to put it either on or adjacent to an exterior wall for that. So that will sometimes come in. If you've got a design where there's one room, it's really hard to put a mini split and have it exterior wall or drain. That's where we're talking, okay, do we need a ceiling cassette? Do we need a floor unit? Do we need some other heating source? And then, fortunately in Colorado, we're usually solving for heating. Cooling takes care of itself. But you really get to work with, how is air going to flow? what is possible, what's the budget, and then come up with the best system from there. All right, our third example is the mix and match. So here's a home, it's in downtown Levita. We've got a forced air system that feeds the whole downstairs, but this area, which it used to be single story, someone came in and renovated and turned it into a beautiful, you got a walk up stairway and 2 very small bedrooms that are actually at the very front of this house. You can see there's not a lot of wall space there. And also, we've got historical district, so we cannot put any line set or anything on the front of this house. And then the last thing, as the homeowner mentioned, the main bedroom is uncomfortable, this room right here. It's furthest from where the furnace currently sits with the ductwork. They also had an add-on to a sitting room that doesn't have any supply vents, and so they're losing conditioning to that. And that has 2 exterior walls on it. So they say they're really struggling to maintain the temperature in their main bedroom. So definite comfort issues. Oh yeah, and AC is a priority. It's getting hotter, and especially up in these upstairs when their kids and family come to visit, they say in the summer it's almost unbearable. So that is what we're solving for. So of course, you should be used to it by now. We're going to go through our whole process. We've got a pretty high heat load just because those upstairs rooms are right on the roof line. And they've done the bonus room, so we've got a lot going on. The breakdown is I've got my 15,000 BTUs per hour just for the upstairs, and then they care about cooling, so I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on that. We've got our bedroom plus sitting room at a little over 11,000 BTUs per hour, and the rest of our downstairs coming up on 27. So the best design after playing around with a lot of different mix systems is I'm going to replace that furnace with an air handler. And then I've got 2 mini splits. One, because there's no wall space for me upstairs, is where we did that nice floor unit, and we'll show what that looks like. And then we add an additional mini split to their bedroom, knowing it's lacking in power. They want that very specific control. The rest of the house can be this temp, but I want that temp where I'm sleeping. And we could point some airflow towards that sitting room for when they want that. So when I do my math here, because I'm going to talk about we're slightly under on heating, if you add up all those numbers, we're coming up around 48, but I need 53 at 5 Fahrenheit to meet my manual J. Could absolutely talk about heat kits or whatnot. However, I've got existing electric wall heaters upstairs, and that's actually, I've got 83 for design, but I need 11. So I've almost made up my difference just by knowing I've got backup baseboard electric heat upstairs. The bedroom includes a sitting room, which they say they don't even use when it's colder, so they can shut that door. And then I'm not heating that extra sitting room. And then lastly, they have a wood stove that on those coldest days they say they're already using. So I've got 2 to 3 different points of, hey, when it actually gets down to 5-0 negative temperatures, they've got built in. So this is the number I'm shooting for. I can get them almost there with just the heat pump, but I know on those coldest days they're taken care of. So that's the fun math. And then ultimately, here's what it looked like. We've got our nice, I used a 4-ton cold climate heat pump for this. I've got my air handler that replaced the furnace back in the utility closet. This is kind of zoomed in, but that's what the floor unit looks like. Those things are actually pretty sleek. I think they're about 2 feet tall, so come up to maybe right here. And was able to fit it into the main area upstairs just by adding cooling to that upstairs level in the summer. They said that's the biggest win for them. And also, they really only use that when family comes to visit. So they can turn that off. They're not even going to condition that upstairs until someone comes in. So most efficient with utility bills, in my opinion, way better than the expense of running extra ductwork up there to condition a space you only use a fraction of the time. And then because we didn't put mini splits in each of those bedrooms, on the front of the house, we're able to run everything through the crawl space to get from one side of the house to the other, stay off the front face of that, and did not upset the historical district. So I think that's it. Thoughts, questions, and especially on the split system.
Do you just not do domestic hot water? Do you just do air to air? You don't want to do air to water? Is that because you don't want to, or you don't think the technology is there?
You want to take that one?
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
happy to
we
share my
do
take.
heat pump water heaters to replace just like water tanks or tankless. But today we're not doing air to water. Like I said, we don't see it that commonly in older retrofits that are more budget conscious. It tends to be like a higher end home or a newer home. The COP, like just looking at the specs, the COP, coefficient of performance, is far worse for air to water than it is air to air. And we think air to air systems will work for most homes. For retrofits and very expensive, and I hope that a lot of new builds go the way of geothermal, but I think it doesn't work well for a lot of retrofits, and there just aren't a lot of drillers in this region. So we don't do that either. We are like, we're going to do air to air Mitsubishi and then kind of expand from there. But even just with that, we can serve pretty much every home. So yeah, probably a lot of new builds do radiant now, right? Yeah. I mean, it's nice. I like radiant floor heating. So one thing we wanted to
question.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
that's why we're
You
here.
guys ever do any swaps of like furnace systems in existing homes with heat pump systems, like a traditional heat pump system?
By traditional heat pump, like what we're talking about
No,
here.
not like traditional heat pumps. Like heat pumps that have been around for 25 years, like the big ones that look like an AC pump.
Oh, like a non-cold climate.
Mm.
And how good
Yeah.
are those? Do they make them? Can we utilize them?
Situationally, and by the way, the question was, do we ever use standard heat pumps versus just going cold climate?
And ducting them into an existing furnace.
Got it. Okay, yes. Here's a perfect example. I was just chatting with a homeowner who has a relatively new furnace. For us, if it's 5 years or less, we can actually put this cold climate heat pump on it, and instead of an air handler, put a coil. And so that turns it into a dual fuel system right away, where you can use the heat pump down to whatever point you set it to say, okay, when it's 10 degrees outside, 15, whatever you want it to be, switch over to the gas system. It has to be one or the other. It can't be doing both at once. Depends on my manual, Jay. It all comes down to the numbers. Every house is different. And again, like this is great. This is a high level group, so we get into it. There's kind of two different ways to think about it. One is what is going to be the cheapest cost of operation for the homeowner. And that is where you're looking at the price of electricity, the price of gas, the efficiency of each as the temperature changes. There's an intersection point. With equipment like this, on an average home, I'm going to say, because it is truly different for every home, I've seen that be 20, 25, whatever, where that's where it starts to make sense utility-wise to switch. Or you can say, hey, I want to use my heat pump for as long as possible because I want electric heat. I don't want to be burning gas. Take me down until the point where it can't keep up and then switch over to gas. So people will choose based on one of those two normally. Yep. And that's exactly right. But then your switchover is probably kind of what we put at the very beginning, around 40%, right? Because these cold climate, they're more powerful. They've got thicker line sets, all of that. That's why they're working at -23. You could go standard heat pump, not going to be as powerful. It's going to lose around 40 and then switch over. So us, again, we're Blanc Electric Homes. Our biggest reason is we want to help this heat pump movement take off. We love the heat pumps that can do it all. But that home where I've got someone who has a relatively new furnace, we don't want to be wasteful with that. It's compatible with these. I want to give her a cold climate and say, I got you down to 10, and then you can kick over to your furnace. Sorry, say that one more time. Less than half,
Yeah.
I think. And again, I'm going to show you an invoice of a recent job we did here. Most of our homes who have needed that, if not all, no, one, the cabin didn't. The cabin didn't qualify for the income.
Yeah.
Most of our homeowners are getting it entirely paid for, if not almost entirely paid for, through various rebate stacking. And what's great about that is now we're leaving them with 200 amps, a bunch more breaker. They're ready for their water heater. They're ready for an EV charger. They're ready for whatever that next thing. They need more electricity. We're future-proofing them.
Yeah. One other thing too that we've been doing more with our electrician is actually doing an added sub panel to the exterior. So we've seen some like square D panels that are like, I don't know, 80 years old on the interior of the home where like, we don't need to touch that. Let's put a new sub on the outside. Honestly, we have to run the circuit to the outside anyway because the heat pump is on the outside. if we're doing a water heater or something else, like sometimes even homeowners prefer stuff on the outside if they're planning to do upgrades outside, like EV in the future, a hot tub in the future. So we've done that, and that's a lot less expensive than upgrading to a 200 amp panel inside, where you often are dealing with like interior walls and running through crawl space. And so that's an option, is to do, if you have an 100 amp inside and a 200 amp service, you can just do a 100 amp sub outside. And most meters have been upgraded. I know Tri-State has worked really hard to upgrade. So Tri-State is the umbrella utility that manages Sangre de Cristo, which is here, and also San Isabel and a bunch of other ones, San Luis Valley, and they've pushed really hard to upgrade all the meters. So most of the meters we've seen are 200 amps. So we haven't had to do any service upgrades yet, which can be very expensive. Although I'm sure that exists, but we've been lucky and not seen that.
You said you got another question. We want to hear it. What's that?
I said, can we send clients? Because you guys like just, it's fine, because like, I have clients that are always like, shouldn't I be a lead? I'm like, it probably is, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys do that.
Yeah, the short answer
Yeah.
is yes. We actually, one of our installers out of Trinidad is sending us clients who, because it is a pain. There is sort of a bureaucratic headache to get registered to upfront, and then there's a lot of paperwork. I mean, you can see like we have to do these timestamp photos for everything. That's why that's there. It's a headache, but for us, we're like, this is the difference between people being able to get a heat pump or not. And part of our mission is we're trying to serve a region that's been underserved, and they're underserved for a reason, which is that most people can't afford a heat pump. So we're getting people like $10,000 off a heat pump. And
Is it
so
for a new home? Like, could you save that much on a new home where there's still enough margin there for you to make money and clients save money?
So new builds have a kind of completely different stack of it. Like we were talking about this earlier, retrofits tend to have carrot incentives and new builds tend to have stick incentives, where there's a code and says you have to build to this. And then retrofits, you'll get a rebate or something for free. So the short answer is probably not. It won't be the same, but retrofits, if someone, especially if they're income qualified, but sometimes they don't even have to be, just in the right utility territory. So
Yeah, and it's like a quick note about what we do is we don't have our HVAC light. We're not installers. We started taking classes. We started going down that road, but realized there was so much of a need to do everything except the install. And we work really well with got one 2-person shops where they don't have a sales team. They don't have an admin team, and we can come in and say, hey, we've found these customers. Here's all your pictures, videos you could need. We've done a design. Here's our manual J. Here's our manual S. Here's a scope of work. We're going to show up on install day and make sure the homeowner is good to go and do that. And then at the end, we're going to do all the rebate admin. We're going to pay you half before you show up, pay you half when you leave. And so for big HVAC outfits, they've already got people doing what we did. They don't need that. But where we live, there's not big HVAC. There's a lot of just small shops that, like, we talk to some, they say, this is great. We've taught them about the rebates. They're like, I don't want to do that. I don't have the time. So they're doing the same thing, where now they're sending us a customer, say, hey, I want to install this. Can you do that rebate thing real quick and help this homeowner pay way less? And yeah. And again, like for us, because there's a lot of lanes, we don't want to be a master of none. We are about all existing homes, helping them figure out how to get a heat pump. And because the very next slide, we're going to get into the rebate stuff. But, how do we make our margin to run a business? We're not trying to get rich, but we are running a business. It's our lifestyle. We pay contractors really well. There's some outfits that do what we do, and they're trying to squeeze the contractor to make less and less. We're not about that. We want contractors excited. Now they're bringing us jobs. So we know we can run our business. Contractors are excited about it, and the homeowner pays less. The true win-win-win, if you will. But that's what we're here to figure out.
Can you talk a little bit about condenser placement? Like, how close do you need to be for your line sets? Is there disadvantages there?
Yeah.
Do you ever put them on a roof or?
Mm-hmm. This is where anyone who's works in the code and with the city, please speak up to that. Everywhere is different. We're doing one today in the city of Pueblo, and that's different than the county of Pueblo, which is different down in Huerfano County, where there's like no rule. Like everywhere we go, we got to make sure we're checking that for code. But here, we typically want to put it up against the home, because we got physical line set. We got to go connect to air handlers or condensers. These things breathe air, so like we don't want anything impeding air 5 feet in front. It needs to get air behind, so it needs to be at least 1.5 feet off. And then we got to be away from gas meters, anything accessible. We need an outlet within 25 feet. So it's a fun game. Every once in a while, it's really hard to find a place to put it, but most of the time, there's a logical place. You can mount them to the side of a building. So instead of the snow stand, people will put it on. For the double fans, we're not doing that. I see the single fans, we see that more common. Can also cause vibration in the home, which is why we prefer the snow stand. But yes, you absolutely can put it up on a flat roof or surface. And we were driving in from Pueblo this morning and saw dozens of them on a new build, all up on the roof on 50. So check that out.
Yeah.
I saw you nod along. Anything you'd like to add? What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is really a balancing act, and like there's so much of this is like here are guidelines and then go figure out the art, but it's a balancing act of as close to the electrical meter as possible, minimizing line set because line set is expensive, and the longer the line set, the more opportunity to leak. The refrigerant leaks, you want the line set to be, if possible, through attic or crawl space, so where is a good access point for that? And often homeowners don't want it on the front of the house, so side of the house, and you don't want it to obstruct a window. It is sort of all of these considerations at once. Like I think I've had more aesthetic conscious customers than you have. And so sometimes it's like, I don't want that there because then the line set will show from my living room and I don't want that. Okay, great. Then we'll shift it to that side of the house. But if we do that, the electrical run is longer. Do you care about that? No, I don't care about that. Okay, great. That's $500 more expensive. Like everything kind of comes with like a trade-off. And so we try to tell homeowners that, so that when they say, well, why can't it be here or here, we say, well, if you put it here, it'll be more cost for XYZ reason. But I feel like you do enough reps of these and we often check each other's work too and say, would you put it here or would you put it, what about this spot? And we'll talk with our contractors too, of course. We'll review videos and sometimes they'll do site walks with us and we'll say, it could be here or here. What do you think? What's the best option? So.
Yep.
The line set itself, is there a limit on how long that can be?
Yes.
Yep. Our manual S software, make sure we're with the line. I think with Mitsubishi, 85 feet is the furthest it wants in most configurations.
Oh yeah, see it's sort of flagging this here.
That was a long
right
one.
Yeah.
If we were 15 more feet, it would have thrown me an error.
Yeah.
And I think it's like 250 feet total in a multi-system like that.
Yeah.
So there are limits. Most unless we got giant homes, we're not bumping into that too often.
It's also, I mean, this is like so in the weeds, but like, do you see how this number is different than this number? These are two different line set lengths or line set widths, I guess. And they only come in specific configurations that are either 30 or 50 feet. And you can braze them together, but when you're thinking about ordering the line set, there's sort of another like, oh, this is 15, that means we need a 30. So some of it too comes to, and then it's like, oh, if we're already getting a 30 and we have 15 extra, can we get a 50 and then just use the rest of that? So you're oh, no, we can't, because, oh, we can, they're the same size. Like you're playing this game of ordering things too and the equipment. And not that we design for the optimum comfort and sort of the best price, but we do think about those things. If they're really long line set runs, can we reuse line set? How do we minimize this by running it through crawl space attic as much as possible? So, and different manufacturers have different line set. It's fun. Everything is bespoke.
Yeah.
We love that.
And we got a little over 10 minutes. Let's do the last slide, which is rebates.
Yeah. Do you want to skip the manual J demo?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But let's just show the slide real quick.
If anyone is interested, we've been previewing this. We use a piece of software to do our manual J. Has anyone done a manual J in this room?
Do you love them?
Okay. Yeah. Do you love them? Do you hate them?
Yeah, so I have a question.
Yeah.
I still do some work out before Collins, and they require manual J to be. Is that an engineer, like, can anyone provide a manual J to the municipality? They don't require it to be a certified.
No, it does. Well, so the software itself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. So this is what's called an ACA certified software. And I think there's 3 or 4 ones now that are ACA certified. And essentially you can use any of those tools. And we use this one because we think it's the fastest, most convenient, pretty reasonably priced. It uses LiDAR on an iPad. So you literally kind of scan like this. and you have to put in building parameters, which, I mean, most of you are builders, so you probably know much more about what a building is made of than we do. But what's nice about this is it has a lot of assumptions baked in. If you put in an address, it knows this house was built in 1952, which means it's likely to have single pane windows and it's a wood frame with no cavity insulation. Great. That means all I have to do is ask the homeowner, what have you changed about the house? Have you upgraded the windows? Like, have you done any siding upgrades? And if the answer is no, then I can assume the defaults are right, as long as I don't see anything different. So it is really easy. I'm happy to share. We
we got our
have the iPad,
We'll
like
show you the
we can
heat
show
load of the
you,
scan in
but
a few
this,
in a
the
few
name is
minutes.
Amply. Also, like the people who work there are just really great, take feedback really well. And so like I think that they're just a really good, easy product to work with.
Yeah.
So, and we do need it for a bunch of the rebates we do. So
Yeah.
we do it for sizing so that we know we're getting, it gives us confidence, but we actually have to do it a lot of the time. So painless as possible.
Yeah, and the reason we share it is like just from the few years we've been in this industry talking to folks, they're like, the reason they do is like, this is such a pain, it takes too long. I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
There are tools out there that we've gotten really good at. It takes truly a few minutes to scan a room, put in the assumptions. Now I've got a number I trust.
Right. Yeah.
So
We do read
yeah, this is a real invoice of a job that's going in this week.
right now.
So it's a 1-to-1, 3.5 ton condenser to an air handler, forced air system for the whole house. The heat pump itself with all equipment, labor, $21,000, and then another $1,500 for electrical because we need a new 40 amp circuit. So this Mitsubishi cold climate hyperheat would be $22,500. This is just a tax credit, so state of Colorado heat pump discount. $350 goes to the customer. What's actually cool is $650 goes back to the contractor. Now we have to front that $350, and then at tax season we get $1,000. But they want us fronting money, and they make it worth in the back end, so they get $350. This customer, because their income between the two of them is under $122,000 in Pueblo County, they got $8,000 for the heat pump and half the electrical covered. Had they made under $60,000, the whole electrical would have been covered. So they got that through the state's HERE program. And then this is cool because she has both Black Hills and Excel. Black Hills for electric, Excel for gas. She can take advantage of both those rebates. So very generous area. She's going to pay $1,900 for this heat pump. All of those are point of sale. Now, like Sangre de Cristo, I think it's a $1,500 that goes direct to the customer. So they, in that region, they'd pay us and then they'd get their money after the fact. But yeah, Black Hills, Excel are generous, but I know Sangre de Cristo is $1,500, and all of these would be applicable anywhere in the state. So rebate stacking can really go a long way in order to bring what's $22,500. That's more than a furnace AC combo usually. Imagine trying to sell against a furnace and AC versus, hey, $1,900, I can get you this. On top of all the other comfort things we've talked about.
Yeah.
Your rebates, are those credits, or is that a check from the customer?
That is a check that comes to us, the contractor. So there's again, this is why we've stepped in to help all the contractors in our region who don't want to do this. When we do our initial home assessment, we have to take certain photos, measurements, send it to the state. At this point, I'd say that's taken us less than 30 minutes to do all of that. In a week, they get an approval. They say, go ahead, proceed with the work. We then collect just the $1,900 from the customer, and within 4 weeks, the HERE program is going to send us that $8,750, and they even have, I think, like about a $500 contractor bonus. So they'll actually send us a check for $9,250.
So none of it is actual tax credits.
Only
This is the only one that for us,
Yep.
the contractor, is a tax credit.
Yep.
So, and we know we're a small enough operation, we can front that, especially with what we're making on these that pay out within a month. For like my last company was a huge operation. Their accounts receivables got in the millions with a lot of these programs. There's different companies that will pay you out for 5-10% of a fee. So my old company was utilizing one of those, so they didn't even have to wait for this. And the contractor bonus essentially paid for the financing fee for the company they were using.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't call out here, but so Sangre de Cristo is part of something called Electrify and Save, which is an on-bill repayment program, which is a financing instrument through your utility bill. So let's say you owe with all the rebates and stuff, let's say you owe $10,000 for a heat pump, you can get a loan. I think that's capped at 5%. That's either five or 10 or 15 years, and then whatever that amount is, let's say it's $200 a month, is just tacked onto your utility bill, and you're paying them directly. And that loan is partially subsidized by the USDA, and so it's capped, and is going to be better interest rates than you'll get anywhere else.
But you, the contractor, get paid out in full at the time of
correct
install, and then the
so
homeowner's
that's a really good program
Tri-state.
for contract. There is an administrative burden, you have to take photos and stuff, but I would say it's on the lower end of administrative burden and pretty good for the homeowner. So we haven't done that as much because San Isabel doesn't have that program, but the more we work in this area, I think the more we'll probably do that. I helped set that up at my last company, so I know that program pretty well.
I noticed there's not any federal rebates or subsidies on here. Is
Correct.
that totally dried up?
Yep, those
Okay.
expired
Yep.
December 31st of
Okay.
last year.
And does the federal have any trickle down to any other, like you mentioned the USDA has a program. Is the Fed still putting some money into this electrification?
Yeah, the short answer is they're not putting any new money into it, but the HERE rebate program, as an example, came through legislation that was passed under Biden, and states applied for it, and Colorado is one of the states that got it in time. So like the money is out the door. It's not in the federal government's hands, and so Colorado was able to keep hold of it. Other states were less lucky and don't have those dollars available to them.
There is conversation about that on that right now.
Yeah.
There is, yeah, which I don't know how they would do that, but
And who knows how long it'll last. Estimates show that this HERE program for income qualified, about 2 years. It's approved until 2031, but it's a finite pot of money, and they're estimating about 2 years on it. So we're very clear with homeowners to say, like, this is a great rebate. It's available. We don't know how long it's going to last. Like, recommend take advantage when you're ready, but at some point it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
We're never in the business of high pressure sales, but we always want to say, like, this is what's here now. This is what's going on. You make the best decision for you.
Yeah. And Black Hills, as an example, has an income qualified program that's free. Everything is free, and that has a finite budget that runs out. And so we're at the point right now where that budget is 50% depleted already by March. And so we're telling new customers, like, hey, we'll put you in the queue, but there's a chance this doesn't move forward. If it's not high urgency, you can wait till next year. But Black Hills and Excel still offer these rebates, so that are not income qualified. So even if you don't qualify for that, it's like, could you make it work if it was $10,000 off? So we're have that a very active conversation about budget.
Does the Excel rebate only apply to retrofit?
Yes, this one. Now they might have a
Yes.
separate program for new builds, but that's out of our scope.
I was gonna say that's way too.
That's way too big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very small.
Yeah. What?
They do good construction.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I think the last
Cool.
slide's
Yeah,
just
just summary,
a
wrap up.
summary, but yeah. So I could tie together some of the higher points. Cold climate heat pumps, they work in Colorado. Don't be fooled by that myth. Proper sizing, definitely critical. Your manual J, manual S. Make sure you've got the math on your side when you're sizing these things, because you want to get it just right. Not too big, not too small. Weatherization makes your heat pump go further, and use those rebate dollars. Again, we take a lot of pride in knowing what all is out there for our homeowners. We're willing to put in the work to make this as affordable as possible.
Also, babies help sell heat pumps. We've learned that.
All right.
Cool.
Any final questions?
We have some flyers in the back that just talk about some of the rebate programs and some of the amounts. Those are more customer facing that we use to help kind of get the word out, but feel free to take some and share them, pass them
Yeah,
around.
and we'll stick around too
Yeah,
if you want to ask questions one-on-one.
So real quick, I understand you guys are out of Worfena, that's in
Yep.
the county,
Yeah.
Oh, all done.
but you're
Yeah.
you're thinking about pushing here in a Chaffee, so that is kind of in your wheelhouse now.
Yeah, we essentially signed up for some of these rebate programs, and you have to sign up by county. So we said, well, let's do all the neighboring counties, and we've been getting a ton of business from what county is Canyon City in? Fremont. Yeah, we've been getting a bunch of business out of there, and so we're like, well, if we're already doing Canyon City, then how much more of a jump is it to do Salida? So yeah, we also love Salida, so thinking about maybe Salida becoming our home base instead of Levita.
We
So-
love Levita. It's not central to where we're serving right now. We're in
Yeah.
that bottom corner. But Trinidad, that's the only place where it's
Yeah.
more convenient. But for the most part, we are driving north and west a lot at the moment.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you
Cool,
guys
yeah,
for
thank
having
you.
us. We
Thanks for the
appreciate it. And we'll
questions.
stick around if there's
Yeah.
any more questions.